Alright, so in this lecture, we're going to be talking about while loops, okay? And let's go ahead and understand what while loops are. So in the last lecture, for loops were something where we used a range function or we iterated through a set of data. While loops, on the other hand, are completely different. The way while loops work is, it repeatedly checks for one single condition. If that condition is true, the code runs. If that condition is false, the code or the while loop ends. Alright? So it's very interesting, very fun. Let's go ahead and check it out. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it counter. Okay? And I'm going to set it equal to 5. So looks like that slash was on an accident, my bad. And over here what I want to do is I'm going to say if while counter is less than 10, okay? While counter is less than 10, print counter or quota, print counter, and then I want to increase counter by 1. So it's giving me an invalid syntax. That's something I picked up while using Swift, my bad. So counter is equal to counter plus 1. And I'll explain what I'm doing. Alright, so 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let's go over the code we just wrote. While counter is less than 10, what does this statement say? All it's saying, or I mean pretty much it's simple English, it's all, it will, Alright, so let's take a look at what this code is doing. Over here, the first statement, while counter is less than 10, is the conditional statement. All it's checking to see is, has the value of counter become greater than 10? If it has, then this loop will end, otherwise this loop will go on forever. Now, the next two statements, printing out counter and then increasing the counter by 1. Now you're probably wondering, well, why are we increasing the counter by 1? I mean, why does it have to do with anything? Well, let's go ahead and leave it. While counter is less than 10, print counter, and nothing happens. Well, why? Because right now, if you print out counter, its value is 10. We've already set up counter to be increased to 10. Let's go ahead, set counter back to 5, and print out or run the statement again. What happens? Your system will eventually crash. I'm not going to show you, but in the end, your IDLE will crash, some bug will happen. Anyways, I'm going to restart my shell. So, shell, restart shell. Yes. And that ended the program. Anyways, as you can see, you need to have a way to end this conditional statement. You shouldn't have an infinite loop. Right now, what we created is an infinite loop. Counter's value is never increasing. So this whole condition is sort of pointless, and the function or the code after that will be running forever. Anyways, this was a brief introduction to while loops. Play around with them. Again, they are very interesting. You can play around with the conditions, but the basic format of the while loop is it keeps on checking for a condition, and once that condition becomes false, the whole loop ends. Infinite loops are actually pretty cool. I mean, you can always create one and see how long your machine lasts until it dies, but don't do that. It's gonna be a burden to your machine. Move on, and in the next lecture, let's talk about nested for loops. See you then.